Welcome to Draw Me Like One of Your Web Browsers, pun intended, of course. So I'm Noël Macé. You can pronounce it any way you want, no problem with that. I'm head of developer relations at BlindNet, a small startup who's focused on privacy by design and this kind of stuff. And I'm here with Pierre Tibulle.
Hello.
CTO of EcoBox. Did I pronounce it right?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. And so Pierre is a really great sketchnoter, and he will do some little doodles live to help you better understand what I'm saying, despite my horrible French accent. And so, without any further ado,
I can't help, I'm French too.
yeah, and especially we can't hear you, I think. I don't know if your mic's on. So, let's go.
Let's
Music.
go. Music. This is us. We go back, really go back, long time ago.
It was nice not to play it too loud.
Sure. Maybe you can.
So yeah, obviously we changed the trailer for the English version. The pun wasn't the same in French. And so yeah, I need to not trying to laugh too loud. Okay, let's go. So, 23rd December 1980. Tim Berners-Lee is only 25 when he starts working at the European Organization for Nuclear Research, CERN, in Switzerland. The CERN built a whole new system to manage its particle accelerator. Tim is here to build its UI, and it handled it pretty well. Of course, the display system is really simplistic, with only 24 lines and 64 characters per line. And yet, TBL managed to show a beautiful overview of the particle accelerator, allowing users to click on each part of it to display information and configuration interfaces. But the CERN is huge, and that complexifies everything. There are more than 10,000 people working there, and each of them use different software on different computers for different projects. Tim needs something to navigate through this mess, some kind of software that could allow him to easily store and retrieve information. So, as any other developer, he starts a new side project, of course. A project based on hypertext, but Tim didn't invent hypertext, though. Actually, it was already pretty old at that time, as it was invented by Ted Nelson in 1965 for the Xanadu project. But Tim will bring this concept one step further to build, well, a wiki, we could say. Of course, it's an anachronic image, just for you to better understand what this software was. Some kind of local database to store pieces of information with bidirectional links between them. Once you start working on the side project, you need to find a memorable name for it, right? Here, Tim finds inspiration in a childhood memory. A musty old book of Victorian advice he noticed as a child in his parents' house outside London. A grimoire with a title susceptible of magic serving as a portal to a world of information. I'm quoting him here. Inquire within upon everything, meaning to the name Inquire. Inquire is a great achievement for TBL, but it's only guided journey at CERN. And this mission was only for 6 months long. Tim has to get back to England for Christmas. But where should he go? Well, Tim loves the countryside way more than big cities. So which part of England could compare with the beautiful mountains of Switzerland? Well, Bournemouth in Dorset, of course. And I'm sure I'm pronouncing it very bad here. Correct me if you want. He stays there for 3 years, working for a small printing system company with technical design responsibilities. There, he gained better understanding of network systems, which will help him a lot for a second mission at CERN in 1984. But CERN has changed a lot in 3 years. So his first mission will be to improve interoperability between different operating systems, and he'll use remote procedure call for that. But it's still a very complex task involving a lot of people. Tim needs Inquire even more than before. So he has to port his software to a new operating system CERN is using, VMS. But at this point, Inquire is still just a simple local knowledge base, and Tim makes no effort to make it multi-user or anything. But still, a few people at CERN will find it pretty useful and start using it too. Because there wasn't any real equivalent on the market at that time. Okay, maybe one equivalent, HyperCard, released by Apple in 1984, so the same year. HyperCard allowed non-programmers to put interactive information together as connected cards. It was a really extensive and popular software until its termination in 2004, but it was more development kit than a software. People were saying software erector at that time. Sounds kind of weird. It was way too complex to use if you just needed a simple hypertext knowledge base. So TBL offers his manager to develop a new knowledge management system based on Inquire. He makes a first formal proposal in March 1989, which is rejected, and then a second successful one in May 1990. From there, other people will join him to build all the required software, especially Nicola Pello, a young and talented student who made huge and crucial contributions. Without her, we wouldn't have the web we know today. So remember her name, Nicola Pello. In 1990, Nicola and Tim already know they need a user-friendly graphical browser. But developing graphical user interfaces is really complex at that time, except on the Next Step operating system. So they use a Next computer, also called the Cube, not to be confused with its succeeding Next Cube, to develop the first web browser. Oh, and Next computers were really expensive, $6,500 US. Today's equivalent would be 12,000 pounds. Not that, it will be important later on. It takes them only 1 month to build the first version of their first browser, and 1 more month to add editing features. And they name this browser World Wide Web. Obviously, this created a lot of confusion, so it's been renamed Nexus soon after that, and this is the name we'll use from there. By summer 1991, Tim's team has completed the development of an HTTP server for Next Step and published it to the internet via FTP. But no one has a Next computer. Remember how expensive it was. So, as a consequence, people couldn't access the web using Nexus. Nicola developed a line mode browser called LMB for line mode browser. And this is all people are asking, actually. Just a simple, no-nonsense way to read documents. But we know the web wouldn't be the web without a GUI, right? In the early 90s, most scientists are using some unique system. So Nicola and team need to port Nexus on X Windows system. But they don't really have time for that. They still rewrite core parts of Nexus and LMB in C, making the command library, aka lib3w, to help others develop new browsers. Seeing that no one really wants to start such a complex project, Tim decides he needs to find and motivate them himself. For that, he spends 3 months in the United States, goes to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, attends the Internet Engineering Task Force conference in Boston, visits the Xerox PARC in Palo Alto. He'll even meet Ted Nelson, the inventor of the hypertext. But still, nobody is willing to develop a Unix-compatible web browser. But here comes a new challenger, Robert Cailliau. Okay, at first, Robert only wants to create a browser for Mac. But he soon abandons this project to take in turn the evangelist mantle and goes to the Helsinki University of Technology, TKK for short, and no, I won't try to pronounce the Finnish name here. You're already hearing my troubles in English right now. There, Robert meets 4 highly motivated students and convinces them to build a graphical web browser for Unix as part of their final year project. And those 4 students will be pretty efficient. They released the first alpha on April 1992, naming this new browser Airwise. As they posted their software on a public CERN's FTP server, Airwise is the very first graphical web browser used outside of the CERN. Unfortunately, Airwise is also really basic. It doesn't provide a lot of features compared to Nexus, and has a really unsatisfactory user experience. It looks like some kind of weird paper document with a serif font on a blue background. But here comes a new challenger again, Pei Wan Wei. Mr. Wei is just a student at Berkeley University. He never actually met anyone from CERN and only heard about the web on Newsgroup. And actually, at first, he doesn't even care about the web. He just wants to easily make beautiful, adventurous video games. So he makes a new object-oriented script language for that named Viola. But Viola makes GUI development way easier, and he gets cocked up in the game, adding hypercard compatibility, then hypertext, and finally HTTP and HTML in April 1992, giving birth to a new browser, Viola 3W. Pei Wan sent a first alpha version to CERN people right after Airwise for feedback, and publicly published a first stable version in May, so really soon after Airwise. Now, Viola 3W is way better than Airwise. There is browser history in a separate window. You can open links with a simple click, while Airwise requires a double click for that. Don't know why. You can record your preferred web pages using bookmarks, etc., etc., etc. Viola 3W will even have a huge and long-lasting impact on the web. For example, Viola 3W introduced styles, which will give birth to the CSS. However, both Airwise and Viola 3W are real small projects. The students from Helsinki shared the source code of Airwise in August, and, well, that's it. Because school is finished, so it's time for them to find a real job. On the other hand, Pei Wan Wei isn't a student anymore, but Viola is still a personal side project, so it doesn't really have time nor money to add a bunch of new features and fix bugs. By 1993, other people created their own web browser, but none of them is a real success. We have Samba, aka Mac 3W, they love the 3W, was started by Robert Cailliau, but mostly developed by Nicolas Pelot. It's the first web browser for Mac, but Nobody cares. Midas, another graphical browser for Unix, was made by members of the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, but they didn't really share it with outsiders, so again, nobody cares. Even in the early 90s, most law experts were already using Windows. So, Cornell Law School builds the first web browser for Windows, named Cello. Guess what? Yep, nobody cares. OK, there is still one more browser a lot of people used, and some are still using it now. Its first version was already compatible with hypertext in 1992. So they just need to add HTML and HTTP support in version 2 to have a real web browser in 1993. And this browser is called Lynx. So, yep, it's a line mode browser, not a graphical one, so it doesn't help here at all. OK, so what? How could the web evolve beyond that? Did you ever heard about NCSA? We never heard about it. Oh, OK, nice. So it's short for National Center for Supercomputing Application, and it's a pretty big research center in the USA. They were among the first to adopt an open source approach. Here again, it's kind of anachronic to say that, but they were advocating for interoperability and collaboration every time. For example, they helped a lot with the adoption of open standards like TCP/IP and Telnet to replace closed technology like DECnet. They even created a project called NCSA Collage. I never knew if it's pronounced like collage in French, or I just say collage, to help share data and documents between different systems, including Unix, Windows, and Mac. So in 1992, the lead developer of Collage for Unix runs into Viola 3W, and he decides to demonstrate it to his colleagues in December. NCSA employees are very humble. So their immediate reaction when they see Viola 3W is, we can do better. And so they directly started a new project for that. Once again, a student named Mark Andreessen is in charge of WebMOS development. But this time, unlike CERN or TKK, NCSA will consider it as a real project with additional developers, money, direction, yada, yada. It takes them 6 months to develop a first version of their web browser for Unix named Mosaic. They then spent 3 more months porting it to Mac and Windows, and 1 additional month to make it compatible with Commodore and Amiga, making Mosaic the first cross-platform web browser in history. They even built their own Unix HTTP server and CSA HTTPD on top of that. And after some time, this server will give birth to Apache. In early 1994, Mosaic is already a hit. 50,000 people download it on the internet. And yeah, it's 1994, so 50,000 is a huge success. And deservedly so, because Mosaic is a revolution compared to Viola 3W. First, it includes all the features you would expect: bookmarks, browser history, etc. in a user-friendly interface with which is pretty similar to our modern web browsers. Like, for example, you add the address bar or other browser, put it on the bottom, and it's the first web browser to put it on the top. More than that, Mosaic will even expand HTML with new features, like inline images, the IMG element. Before that, you actually needed to open separate window to show an image. Mosaic was even the first browser to introduce forms, videos, and sounds. And yet, Mark Andreessen, the student who built a big part of it, isn't really happy with that. In 1994, Mark wasn't a student anymore. as he recently graduated from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. But the NCSA refused to make him director of the Mosaic project. So Mark decides to leave NCSA for California, where he meets Jim Clark. Together, Mark and Jim found the first ever commercial company dedicated to the web, the Mosaic Communication Corporation. And of course, the goal of this company is very obvious: to sell a commercial fork of the Mosaic browser. NCSA isn't really happy with that, so to avoid lawsuits, Mark and Jim quickly decide to rename their company and web browser from Mosaic to, anyone knows it? Netscape. Okay, thank you. There is some old person in the room. Thank you very much. Because, yeah, I'm too. Because you see, NCSA has also decided to sell copies of its own Mosaic browser. This is why we say NCSA Mosaic to distinguish it from others. But it won't sell it to people like you and me. They were selling Mosaic licenses to other companies, so they can rebrand and sell it themselves. But in 1994, NCSA decides to transfer all Mosaic commercial rights to Spyglass. Here again, Spyglass will never directly sell Mosaic to individuals. They will act as an OEM, selling Spyglass Mosaic to other companies for them to embed it in books, operating systems, ATMs, etc., etc. Spyglass also decides to, apparently, build its own new version of Mosaic from scratch, but without adding any features. They say officially they never use the actual code source from NCSA, but it's exactly the same product at the end. It's kind of weird. And actually, it was a big mistake not to add any features, because on the other hand, Netscape never stopped innovating at that time. Especially they hired Brendan Hirsch on April 1995 to build a new scripting language in 10 days only. Several names were given to this new language: Mocha, LiveScript, but due to a partnership with Sun, and mostly for marketing purposes, you forgot to do it with links. No, okay, thank you. So drum roll, and mostly for marketing purpose, Netscape decided to ride on Java's fame and name it
JavaScript.
JavaScript, thank you. Thank you, Pierre, not thank you to user room. In September 1995, Netscape finally released Netscape Browser 2.0 with JavaScript, and also frames, plugins, and a bunch of other disruptive stuff. But there is this company that's really, really not happy with that: Microsoft. Is there anyone from Microsoft in the room today?
It's your time.
Oh, too bad, because we are used to have Microsoft people in the front row. So okay.
Every time, and it was.
So we can tell everything we want. Okay, all right. Okay, I'm all right on time. So, as you already know, Microsoft has a real comfortable position in the early 90s, right? IBM PC compatibles have become the de facto personal computer standard, and Microsoft Windows is installed on 90% of them. At first, Bill Gates didn't even believe in the internet, allegedly saying in 1994 that it saw little commercial potential for the internet for the next 10 years. Yeah, right. So Microsoft focused on local heavy applications like Microsoft Office, and purposefully made software development on Windows extremely difficult for non-Microsoft developers to avoid any true competition. They even imposed per processor license agreements, forcing personal computer makers to pay a licensing fee for each computer shipped with a particular model of microprocessor, even for machines not loaded with Microsoft operating software. Of course, this abuse of dominant position is highly illegal, especially in the United States. So after a short investigation, the US Justice Department and Microsoft reached a settlement to end these practices, especially to link any other product to Windows. But this settlement was very gentle to Microsoft, to be honest, allowing them to add new features, in the quotes, to Windows without clearly defining what a feature actually means. This will have great importance later on. Again, you'll see. All good?
All good.
Yeah, all right. So in the meantime, we already saw that the web is becoming more than just a documentation platform, right? With JavaScript, forms, and plugins, Netscape became a true application development platform, and especially an interoperable and easily accessible one. So Microsoft realized this could endanger its monopoly on personal computing software. And they decide to do everything possible to oppose Netscape progress. But first, Microsoft will still try to find an easy and illegal, of course, solution for that. On June 1995, only 3 months before Netscape 2.0 release, they knock on Netscape door and offer to make a crooked deal, a naked market division agreement. So drum roll. Or not, there isn't any surprise there. Because this means Microsoft won't release a web browser for any other operating systems than Windows, but only if Netscape commits to never provide a Windows version of their browser. This is totally illegal. But Netscape refused this proposal, so Microsoft will engage itself in a predatory campaign in 3 steps. So first, they continue to make anti-competitive deals with IBM PC-compatible providers. Any company refusing this deal, like IBM, needs to pay a prohibitively high price for any Microsoft product without access to any good support. Microsoft already purchased Spyglass Mosaic licenses in the late 1994. They just rebranded it to Internet Explorer 1. And they released it in August 1995. So Internet Explorer 1 is just Spyglass Mosaic with another logo. That's it. So they released it right after Netscape refused the illicit agreement. Of course, they also use their dominant position on anti-competitive deals and so on to impose their browser on the masses, tying it to Windows because, hey, it's just a new feature, right? So just so you know, IE1 was also sold as a separate product as part of the Microsoft Plus pack. So yeah, just a feature, all right. Okay, so that was step 1. Step 2, revenge of the vengeance. Microsoft ports IE2 to Macintosh in November 1995 to compete with Netscape, of course. But Netscape 2.0 was already released soon before that, while IE2 is still just Spyglass Mosaic. So long for the competition. Microsoft spent another year trying to catch up with Netscape, finally releasing IE3 in August 1996. But Netscape released Netscape Browser 3 just a week after that. Here, Microsoft realized there is absolutely no comparison between Internet Explorer and Netscape. Any user running the 2 browsers side by side can see Netscape is way better than Internet Explorer. There is no chance anyone in their right mind could possibly choose Internet Explorer over Netscape. And I'm even quoting Microsoft people here. So it's time for the third and final step, unnecessary soldering. So is one other quote. Microsoft concluded that merely tying Internet Explorer to Windows was not sufficient to defeat Netscape, and that to win the browser war, it must make Windows and Internet Explorer difficult to separate. So they commingled IE3 code with the operating system one and refused to supply an unbundled version, forcing OEMs to license that product. And it's important here to underline that there was no technical or economic justification for that. They just use Windows' dominant position to impose Internet Explorer. That's it. Finally, with all these deceptions put together, Microsoft won, leading Netscape to a quick death. In 1998, Netscape underwent a large round of layoffs before being acquired by America Online AOL. IE overtakes Netscape the year after that, establishing itself as an unchallenged leader for 10 long years. But Netscape wasn't done yet. Before being bought by AOL, they announced a pretty bold decision. The next version of Netscape Communicator, version 5.0, will be free, as in gratis, and open source. You need to realize here that nobody was doing that at that time. Most people thought Netscape was losing its mind. And as a matter of fact, AOL thought the same and decided to put an end to Netscape Communicator 5.0 right after the acquisition. Yet, this decision still gave birth to a pretty confidential project. Can you guess the name of this project? No one? Seriously? Mozilla. Yeah? This was your idea? OK, all right. So at first, it was just a domain name, mozilla.org. And that's it. But Netscape developers also started to build a new engine named Raptor, then NG Layout, and finally Gecko. On the 7th of December 1998, the Mozilla team published an alpha version of Gecko and demonstrated it to a few developers. Everyone can see here what a huge improvement Gecko is compared to any other browser engine, with pretty impressive performances. Unfortunately, Gecko is still very incomplete. And obviously, a single engine doesn't make a complete browser. The Mozilla team will need a lot of time before releasing a new browser that could compete with IE. It will take nearly 3 years for them before releasing Mozilla 1.0 on the 5th of June 2002, putting at the same time an end to Netscape browser. But finally, AOL decides to get rid of Mozilla in 2003, giving $2 million to fund the new Mozilla Foundation. This new independent foundation then released Firefox 1.0 on the 9th of December 2005. Still, Firefox doesn't really directly impose itself against Internet Explorer. 10% of all web browser users will switch from IE to Firefox in a year, but in 2006, Firefox shares fall again. Fortunately, Microsoft had already made a huge mistake before that, which will lead IE to its end. In 2003, they decided to reinforce the ties between IE and Windows even further, making IE updates depend on the Windows one. So why was it a mistake? Well, because Windows Vista, of course. Microsoft released Windows Vista on November 2006. And it's yet another big blunder. Everybody hates this new version of Windows and wanna keep using XP, right? But if you use Windows XP, you can't have updates for Internet Explorer. So you are stuck with an old and buggy web browser. People have no other choice than switching to Firefox, actually. So we saw that Firefox contributed to overthrown Internet Explorer. No doubt with that. Yet, when Internet Explorer lost its dominant position in 2010, only 30% of all people were using Firefox. We all know another browser arrived, a huge open source project, receiving tons of contribution from all around the world. A project which changed the face of the web forever. You all know its name. Say it as 3, 1, 2, 3. OK. OK, we have 16 minutes left. OK, we're not on the same page here at all. You need to review the basics. Sorry to say that. Let's get back to the 90s. So, in the 90s, the personal computing world is entirely occupied by Microsoft Windows. Well, not entirely. one small community still holds out against the invaders. In 1991, Linus Torvalds published the source code of a new operating system to the FTP server of FUNET, the Finnish University and Research Network. Linux is born. Very few people use it. But still, those are really passionate people. And they really want to see Linux win against Windows. But there is still one big issue here. Linux applications are still too complicated for end users. None of them look or behave alike. On the 14th of October 1996, Matthias Etrich posted a message on Usenet with the following title: New project, cool desktop environment, cool with a K, programmers wanted. His idea is to build a coherent and easy-to-use desktop environment for Linux using common libraries like Qt and a new KDE HTML widget library, KHTMLW for short, to render HTML. 1 year later, on the 20th of October 1997, the new KDE community released KDE Beta 1, which includes a file manager named KFM for KDE File Manager. KFM uses KHTMLW to render files and folders using HTML. So if you type an HTTP URL in the address bar, you can view an HTML web page, making KFM a kind of web browser. But still, KHTMLW doesn't understand CSS nor JS. And those languages are rising fast in the late 90s. So, KFM isn't enough. KDE needs a true web browser. But Mozilla was announced in 1998, so most members of the KDE community prefer to wait for it. After all, that shouldn't take too long to build a Mozilla open source web browser, right? But Lars Noll doesn't agree with that. He wants to build his own web browser just for fun. So first, he takes ownership of the KHTMLW library development, renaming it KHTML. It gets rid of the W, and adds DOM compatibility. Then Harry Porton joined him to add its own JavaScript engine, and it will take them 1 more year to add CSS. Finally, in October 2000, KDE 2 is released with a brand new web browser, Conqueror. Yay! Okay, I see you don't see why I'm talking about that like at all. You see, we'll connect the dots soon enough, and all of this will make sense, I promise. But before that, we need to talk a little bit about Apple. In 1998, Apple made a deal with Microsoft, making Internet Explorer the default browser on Mac for 5 years. But in 2001, Microsoft reallocates most Internet Explorer for Mac developers to IE for Windows. They basically stopped Internet Explorer for Mac development. It gets buggy, slow, with security issues. Long story short, using Internet Explorer on Macintosh is a nightmare. But fortunately, the deal with Microsoft comes to an end directly after that, in 2002. So Apple realized they need to build their own web browser. So in 2003, Apple finally released Safari, built on top of WebKit, a fork of KHTML, the web library from KDE. See, I told you that it would make sense. We could say Conqueror, therefore KDE, therefore Linux has been the starting point of a new modern web era, leading to a new modern mobile application-oriented platform. In 2005, Nokia, who's leading the mobile device market, also decided to use WebKit to build a new web browser for its Symbian system. In 2007, Apple, again, released the iPhone 2G, which includes the first modern mobile web browser, also based on WebKit, of course, is also Safari. And finally, in 2008, Google released Android 1.0 with, yeah, you guessed it by now, yet another mobile web browser based on WebKit, the Android browser. So no, we can finally talk about Google and Chrome Sorry for this little deception. On the 1st of December 2008, Google announced the birth of Chrome with a comic strip, because obviously it's always better to have pictures to better understand web stuff. Am I right?
I agree.
So, in 39 beautiful pages illustrated by Scott McCloud, by the way, check out Scott McCloud's comics, are beautiful. They explain how and why this new browser is stable, fast, clear and intuitive, secured, and open source. So Chrome is, without any doubt, a game changer, especially because it uses a bunch of battle-tested preceding open source projects, including WebKit. In 2 years, 10% of all web browser users switched to Chrome, and Firefox experienced its first noticeable decrease. In 2014, Chrome replaced the Android browser. And finally, in 2017, Chrome wins the second web browser war, having more than 50% of all users. And the same goes with consultation of web pages from mobile devices compared to desktop. The web is now mobile first on Chrome. But Chrome's leadership doesn't end here. Even competitors will join the party. Opera first decided to switch to Chromium with its version 15, in 2013. And ironically, it will be followed by Microsoft, who will only maintain its own modern web engine for 5 years, from the replacement of IE by Edge in 2013 to the switch to Chromium in 2020. Here is tempting to compare Google's monopoly to the Microsoft one from the 2000s. So, sure, the Chrome Android duo looks a lot like IE Windows 1, but the comparison ends here. While Microsoft hated and feared the web, Google was born by and for the web. Far from seeking to slow it down, Google wants the web to rise and win in all areas. But there is a glass ceiling over their head, and its name is Safari, of course, because Apple made WebKit mandatory on iOS. So even if you install Chrome or Firefox on your iPhone or iPad, you're still not using Chrome or Firefox, actually. You're using a weird modified version based on WebKit. So now, we face a weird situation where we have to thank Apple closeness and anti-competitive policy for saving the web priority. But that's not even the biggest issue. In the first page of its announcement comics, Google was already announcing the following. Today, most of what we use the web for on a day-to-day basis aren't just web pages, they are applications. All Chrome has been built around this idea. Separate tabs are rendered by separate processes with separate JavaScript threads, the same way an operating system does for applications. In 2015, Google doubled on its advocacy for web application with the progressive web app narrative. Chrome people wanted to put an end to native apps. But still, web apps lacked some features native apps offered. So Google built the Fugu project to reduce this app gap. And actually, no one except Google actually really needs that. Let me explain. We already have a good and clear process to define new web standards. W3C now have a web incubator community group, aka WICG, allowing anyone to contribute. And the WhatWig was already built from the start with this openness in mind. So, when the community needs a new web API, let's say to access USB devices, for example, we can already be sure that the proposal will be made, debated, challenged before a consensus is reached. Of course, this process is slow, because we need to make sure the background concept of the web platform are respected, especially users' privacy and security. The Fugu project seems redundant with this process. It only allows Google to use a huge marketing budget and dominant position to push its own agenda to the community. This way, They can make a call to popularity. All web developers want this, so we don't have time for a long peer review and consensus. We have to integrate it in Chrome right away. In June 2020, most devices and sensor API drafts were not sufficiently debated and therefore exposed users to fingerprinting and other security issues. Both Safari and Firefox teams announced they consider those new API harmful and that they won't develop them until these issues has been resolved. But Chrome doesn't care about that. And now, many developers consider Safari and Firefox are just lazy and are slowing down the modernization of the web platform. Nothing could be further from the truth. Yeah, sorry for that. As web developers and users, we need to ask ourselves what the web means to us. Is it just a cool platform among others because we like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? HTML and JavaScript, sure. CSS, yeah, we'll see. So, is it just the same as using React Native or Flutter, for example? Or is it a very special platform we need to protect? The only platform built on open standards, by collaboration and consensus. The only platform built with both interoperability and accessibility in mind. The only platform which, from the start, puts users' privacy and security as a top priority. If, like me, you believe in the second approach, you need to understand some compromises are necessary to protect this beautiful idea. The web cannot be synonymous with Chrome, and especially, it cannot be synonymous with insecure and dangerous features. We have to make sure every platform feature we use respects our privacy. For that, we need to use other browsers from time to time. It's okay to use Chrome, I use it also, but just try to use other browsers and test your web apps with Firefox and Safari. And especially, test the risk-benefits ratio of any new experimental API. Okay? And that concludes this history of web browsers. Okay, you also finished the drawing, so big thanks to you all. Maybe we have time for a few questions. Yeah, yes. Maybe there is 3 minutes left, I think. Thank you very much. Any question? Yeah.
Did the Google Chrome team made a secret deal with the RAM vendors?
With what?
RAM vendors.
Chrome. Where was that?
No, it's a bad joke because Chrome uses a lot of RAM, so it was.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Sorry, I don't have anything to answer to that. Not really a question. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Is there a real question? Yeah.
Thanks for the really interesting talk on the history. I guess looking forward, any predictions for the future?
Looking forward to any correction in the future.
Predictions for I guess the future.
Okay,
now,
yeah.
Now
so the question is, do I have any projection to give you for the future? Prediction, sorry. I especially hate to do that. There was actually some studies proving that the more expert you are, the more wrong you will be about the future. So yeah, I don't have anything to really predict. And the only thing I can say right now, and this is actually a topic for another talk and giving in a month, it's that all of this is really depressing right now. Yeah, just to give it some of trailer and give you my idea of it. The title for my next conference is Should We Lose Hope About Everything and Especially the Web? So yeah, I have this feeling that Chrome right now is winning. And when I say Chrome, it's okay. Chrome is a really good web browser, etc. And it's especially linked to the privacy paradox that we all agree to give a lot of our freedom by using some software that don't respect our privacy, etc. Because it's easier, because we want superpowers of some kind. And yeah, I have this sensation that if I have a prediction, one prediction, it will be that the web will be synonymous of Google as a platform, especially right now with the web standards process, to look at it. But still, okay, one positive note to end it. We have some proof that people are still concerned about these matters when it's really important, like when we had the proposition for the federated learning of courts, FLOC, which was really bad, made by Google. People made it stop and made sure we will never have this kind of stuff on the platform. So maybe there is some room for hope here. And I think, yeah, maybe, do we have time for another question? Yeah? Okay.
So kind of related to the last question, we've seen some more web browsers come up in the last few years. I think Brave is the biggest one, Vivaldi and a couple of others. Are there any of these you're kind of optimistic about? That you think will get bigger and more used?
Optimistic about any new platform? Is that your question?
Like new web browsers, like Brave.
Oh,
or Vivaldi,
okay. Okay, so what's about all the web browser I didn't talk about, right?
Yeah,
Brave, etc. So, yeah, we could have a whole talk about Brave. I think it's really bad and really badly managed by a really bad person. But it's another topic. The real question is about the web browser engines, actually. It's about how you implement the web standards, etc. So yeah, everything around it is not really about the web platform itself. It's about your user experience. And of course, it's important. Like, if you need to use some Chromium browser, it's still better to use the privacy-oriented rebuild of Chromium, for example, instead of Chrome, because you won't have all this danger to your privacy. But yeah, the real question, I think, is about web browser engines. And right now, we only have WebKit, Safari, Gecko, but I think it was his name, for Firefox. And every other browser is Chrome, actually, is Chromium. So yeah, using Edge, or Microsoft Edge, or Brave, or Opera, etc., doesn't change anything about the web standards and what it meant to privacy, security, etc., etc. So you still have exactly the same problem if you use Brave instead of. Is that a signal that we need to stop there? Yeah, I guess so. Okay, thank you very much.